There are moments in life that don't announce themselves with celebration or clarity. They arrive like strange weather, quiet, shifting, unsettling. Something begins to stir, but nothing on the surface has changed. You still wake up. Tired, you still walk the same streets. You still carry the same disappointments. But somewhere deeper, something is cracking. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He wasn't speaking about trauma or tragedy. He meant awakening, the strange soul-twisting process that often begins not with progress, but with collapse. One of the signs that you're about to enter the best stage of your life is that you stop believing your life is over. When things fall apart, you feel disoriented. You don't know what you want anymore. The identity you wore so tightly, the ambition, the relationships, the beliefs that made sense, suddenly feel like costumes, too heavy, too narrow. They no longer fit. This is not regression. It is not failure. It is the beginning. Jung believed the psyche moves toward wholeness, the way rivers seek the sea. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require clarity. It pulls you forward even through confusion. Especially through confusion, you begin to notice that the people you used to envy no longer inspire you. The rewards you chased start to feel meaningless. You look at the metrics, money, praise, control, and feel a kind of spiritual nausea, not because you failed to achieve them, but because you have, and they didn't touch what matters. This is your soul withdrawing consent, and that emptiness you feel, that silence, that strange disinterest in what once fueled you. It's not depression, it's incubation. The best stage of your life rarely begins with a new job or a romantic epiphany. It begins in silence, in the void, in the shedding of identities you once clung to like lifeboats. Jung called this enantiodromia, the turning of things into their opposites. When what once gave you comfort now makes you restless, when the pursuit of light leads you into shadow, not as punishment, but as correction. It's life balancing itself. It's you turning toward what you tried to avoid. And there's another sign, a painful one. You start losing relationships, not because of betrayal or blame, but because you've stopped pretending. The roles you once played to maintain peace begin to feel like betrayals of your own growth. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You stop entertaining people who exhaust your nervous system, and you stop apologizing for wanting more. More depth, more truth, more silence, more soul. That loss is not loneliness, it's pruning. And what feels like isolation is actually spaciousness. Something new is trying to enter. But first, something old must die. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not about fixing what is broken. It's about remembering what has been forgotten. It's about retrieving the lost parts of yourself, the abandoned dreams, the forbidden feelings, the sacred instincts you buried to become acceptable. And this retrieval doesn't happen through logic, it happens through disruption. You start dreaming more vividly. You start noticing symbols everywhere, in music, in strangers' words, in sudden déjà vu. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that guide your attention toward what your conscious mind has missed. You begin to feel that something is speaking to you, not with words, but with timing. This isn't magic. This isn't superstition. It's your psyche trying to realign you. When you begin the best stage of your life, you don't feel triumphant. You feel cracked open. You feel overwhelmed by tenderness. You begin to see that your past wasn't a mistake. It was a preparation. Every heartbreak, every detour, every moment you thought you were lost was shaping your capacity to wake up. Now you begin to feel time differently, not as a pressure to perform, but as a vessel for deepening. You begin to savor quiet moments, not because they are pleasant, but because they are real. You start measuring your days not in productivity, but in presence, and slowly, painfully, beautifully, you stop trying to become someone and start remembering who you already are. You won't notice the change all at once. You won't wake up one morning bathed in revelation or certainty. What actually happens is quieter, more private, and often stranger than you'd expect. It's not that the world transforms, it's that your perception begins to fracture and reassemble. The second sign that you're on the edge of the best stage of your life is that you stop needing everything to make sense. Carl Jung never said that healing was neat. In fact, he insisted that a certain amount of chaos was necessary for transformation. If your world still makes too much sense, you're likely still inside a story someone else gave you, a story meant to explain you, contain you, and define you before you ever had the chance to speak for yourself. When that narrative starts to fall apart, not from trauma, but from transparency, you begin to see clearly you were not living your own life. You were living a role, a defense, a mask for your real hunger. But now you begin to ask questions that make no promises. What if I've never actually wanted what I chased? What if I'm not meant to fit in, but to awaken something uncomfortable in others? What if meaning isn't something you find, but something you suffer toward? The stage you're entering doesn't reward cleverness. It doesn't congratulate ambition. It strips you down until you're nothing but a question. Not what should I do, but what am I becoming? And this is where fear begins to transform, not disappear. Transform. You still feel anxious. You still worry, but your fear begins to feel like a compass instead of a cage. You start leaning into what you once avoided: solitude, silence, uncertainty. These no longer signal failure. They began to feel like rites of passage. Jung believed that fear was not the enemy. It was the threshold, the guardian at the gates of authenticity. You had to walk through it to become whole. You had to greet it, speak to it, and let it show you what you were running from. So you stop running. You sit in rooms that once felt unbearable. You hear your own thoughts echo, and you no longer flinch. You listen to old memories, but instead of shame, you feel tenderness. You revisit past versions of yourself, not to condemn them, but to reclaim them, because now you know every past self, angry, ashamed, insecure, was doing the best it could with the awareness it had. Awareness is what changes everything. Another sign is that you stop being addicted to certainty. You no longer demand that life be fair or predictable. You begin to live with the ambiguity Jung called holding the tension of opposites. It means allowing love and anger to coexist, joy and grief, hope and despair. You stop needing to choose between them. You hold them all, not because you're indecisive, but because life is not reducible to binary logic. This is maturity, not chronological, but existential. And then something extraordinary begins to happen. You start noticing beauty again, not in grand gestures, not in perfect people, but in the small cracks where reality breathes. You find it in the eyes of strangers, in the trembling of your own voice when you speak the truth, in the way a breeze moves through a room, as if carrying a message meant only for you. This is not romanticism. It is perception sharpened by suffering. You begin to see the sacred in the mundane. Because your soul has been forced to slow down, you no longer sprint through your days chasing meaning. You begin to inhabit your time. You talk less, you listen more, you observe, you feel. You begin to align your life not with achievement, but with resonance. Something either feels like home in your nervous system, or it doesn't. That is another sign. You stop tolerating this alignment, not because you're angry, but because your body refuses to betray you anymore. You walk out of rooms that used to drain you. You cancel plans that feel like performance. You stop justifying your energy to people who refuse to meet you at depth, not out of arrogance, out of reverence. You have survived too much to keep playing small. You have tasted too much pain to keep swallowing your truth, and slowly, your life becomes quieter and truer. You stop proving. You start protecting. You stop pretending. You start returning to yourself, and this return is not easy. It's not glamorous sometimes. It looks like losing jobs. Sometimes it looks like letting go of people who never really saw you. Sometimes it means sitting with the excruciating knowledge that everything you built was meant for a version of you that no longer exists, but it's in that sitting, that grieving, that dismantling, that your new life begins. Carl Jung didn't promise that the best stage of your life would be easy. He didn't promise comfort. What he promised, if anything, is that the soul longs for wholeness more than it longs for safety. And that's the paradox. Wholeness feels unsafe because it demands you include everything you were taught to hide: your rage, your grief, your desire, your longing to be seen, even when you feel unworthy. And when you begin to include those parts, you stop seeking permission to exist. You begin to belong, not to society, not to culture, but to your own life. And maybe that's the most profound sign of all. You begin to love your life, not because it's perfect, but because it is yours. Somewhere along the way, you stop chasing turning points. You realize that beginnings don't always look like fireworks. Sometimes they look like walking away quietly. Sometimes they look like rest. Sometimes they look like waking up and no longer feeling the need to fix yourself. And this, too, is a sign you are about to enter the best stage of your life, when you stop trying to become someone extraordinary and start living with extraordinary honesty. Carl Jung warned of the modern soul's obsession with forward motion. Our culture teaches progress like it's a ladder, that if you climb far enough, if you hustle hard enough, if you shine brightly enough, you'll arrive somewhere, complete, whole, admired. But your soul doesn't move in straight lines. It turns in spirals. It revisits old wounds, not to punish you, but to ask, have you truly faced this yet? So, the third sign is subtle. It's the shift from fixing to feeling. You stop analyzing your emotions like puzzles. You start honoring them like guests. Not everything needs to be healed right now. Some parts of you don't want resolution. They want recognition. You begin to notice when you're abandoning yourself in the name of being nice. You start feeling the discomfort in your chest when you silence your truth. You begin to hear the difference between self-sacrifice and self-erasure, and you realize how much of your pain came not from others, but from your own complicity. In your own disappearance. This realization isn't cruel. It's liberating, because if you abandoned yourself, you can return another sign. Time begins to feel different. Not faster, not slower, just deeper. You stop rushing the seasons of your life. You start recognizing that the most meaningful changes often happen in the dark, unseen, uncelebrated, misunderstood by others. You no longer need to be witnessed to be valid. That is the moment you become powerful in a quiet, dangerous way, because now you're not performing growth, you're embodying it. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But this privilege often begins with heartbreak. Heartbreak not from romantic loss, but from shedding your false selves, from realizing how many years you spent living for approval, from watching the person you thought you were dissolve, and having no idea what will take their place. And here's the paradox. The more uncertain you feel, the closer you are no longer holding on to an identity. You are becoming fluid, responsive, alive. Your values begin to shift. You prioritize rest, not laziness. Boundaries, not walls. Integrity, not performance. and you begin to see success differently. Not as wealth or control, but as peace of mind and freedom of soul. You begin to realize that meaning doesn't shout. It whispers in the way your body exhales in safe company, and the conversations that leave you more whole, not more hollow. In the small moments where you show up fully, without disguise, and here comes another sign. You stop comparing you. Stop measuring your life against timelines, trends, titles, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've finally begun. Listening to yourself, you feel when something is right, even if it doesn't make sense. You trust your own rhythm. You don't need to explain your choices anymore. Not to your parents, not to your peers, not even to your past self. This is not rebellion. It's alignment. You realize that comparison is a cheap substitute for purpose, and you are no longer for sale. You begin to protect your peace like sacred fire. You walk away from gossip. You ignore what drains you. You stop over-explaining. You begin to see that silence is not emptiness. It's clarity. And now, you've entered something sacred. You start to glimpse the best stage of your life, not in grand achievements, but in how it feels to be you, to walk into a room and not perform, to sit with discomfort and not escape, to speak the truth and not trembly. Oh, become rooted. Not rigid, but rooted. You bend, but you do not break. You know who you are, not because of titles or degrees, but because of the storms you survived, and the parts of yourself you've chosen to love, even when they felt unlovable. This is the maturity that Jung believed made life truly meaningful. Not certainty, not perfection, but wholeness, the integration of every contradiction, every emotion, every unlived truth. And this stage is not flashy. It is not loud, but it is real. You begin to walk differently, not faster, but more grounded. You begin to love differently, not more, but more honestly. You begin to live differently, not chasing, but allowing. The best stage of your life is not something you unlock. It's something you remember. And when it arrives, you will not feel euphoric. You will feel calm. You will feel steady. You will feel like home. And that is how you will know if this video met you in a quiet place you didn't know needed words. Share it. Let someone else know. They're not the only one feeling this shift. Leave a comment. Tell us what season of life you're leaving behind and what kind of self you're finally ready to meet. And if you want more voices like this one, subscribe, because the best stage of your life begins when you stop waiting for it.